Hello. Let's think about the question, why do all economies experience economic fluctuations or business cycles? To answer this question, we use the aggregate demand, aggregate supply framework. The aggregate demand curve is the sum of consumption spending, investment spending, government spending, and net exports. Long-run aggregate supply is what we can produce given our resources and technology, and the short-run aggregate supply curve is what a firm can and want to produce given the price level, like consumer price index. All right, so what happens to business cycles is that they're unpredictable and irregular because something shocks the economy. So what I'm going to look at now is just an example. Suppose that consumer spending suddenly increases unexpectedly. An increase in the consumer spending will shift out our aggregate demand curve. As you see, this increase in aggregate demand will lead to a new short-run equilibrium where real GDP is higher than it was before. This real GDP that happens at this time period can be plotted over here at this new time period at this point. Of course, in order to produce more goods and services, firms will have to hire more people, which is why we expect that the unemployment rate will be lower. At the same time, all these consumer spendings is going to be chasing a limited number of goods and services, and therefore we expect there to be a shortage and an increase in prices. So inflation will pick up a little bit. That's what I'm showing right there. Now, what could the government or the Federal Reserve do to get this overheating economy to slow down a little bit? Well, there are several options that they have. One is they could increase taxes. They could reduce government spending. Those will be the government policy choices. Or the Fed could increase the interest rate, which will reduce investment. Suppose that the Fed does something like this, and what happens then, or the government, is that aggregate demand is going to shift back to where it was before. And if we do it just right, then we're going to get back to the natural level of output. So at this new time period, we're going to end up right over here in terms of output, unemployment, and inflation. Suppose next that we see a decrease in aggregate demand, maybe because there's a lack of confidence and both consumers and investors cut back on their spending. This would reduce our aggregate demand to something like this, a decrease. And you can see now that we will have real GDP that is below the natural level of output. And we can draw this point over here. And when we have less demand, firms will not need to produce as many goods and services, and therefore they might actually cut back on employment, and we might see an increase in unemployment. Again, we have a surplus, and therefore we expect prices to fall, so we might expect a decrease in the rate of inflation. What we have now, and you can see that we could just continue doing this going back and forth. For example, if there was expansionary fiscal policy, then the government would say reduce taxes, increase government spending, or the Fed would reduce interest rate, and we could shift back the aggregate demand curve to where it was before. Unemployment go back to what it was before, and inflation would go back to where it was before. And if I were just to connect all these time periods and different variable measures of these variables, you can see that what I'm doing here is tracing out a business cycle. And you can see that the unemployment rate is counter-cyclical to this business cycle, whereas the rate of inflation is actually pro-cyclical, that is, it goes up and down together with the business cycle. All right, so this is how we think about the business cycles and how we can explain it. And of course, we can go into more detail, but for right now, this is all I want to show you. Thank you.